Hello and welcome to The Explainer. So let's talk about that moment. The judge bangs the gavel, the verdict is in your favor, you've won. But what if that's it? What if the other side just ignores the ruling? That feeling of victory can fade pretty fast. Today, we're diving into what happens after the win. We're looking at the real machinery of justice, civil enforcement in Yemen.
And really, this is the whole ballgame, isn't it? You've got this official court document, a judgment that says you are owed something. But you can't exactly take that piece of paper to the grocery store. So how do you bridge that massive gap between a decision on paper and actual real-world justice? Well, the answer is a powerful legal process called civil enforcement.
Civil enforcement, or al-tanfith al-jabri, as it's known in Arabic, is basically the court system flexing its muscles. It's the official rule book for compelling the losing party, the debtor, to actually do what the judge ordered. This isn't about asking nicely anymore. This is where the state steps in to make sure justice isn't just declared, it's delivered.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to look at what happens right after the verdict, find out what keys you need to get things moving, explore the difference between using force and seizing property, and even see what happens when you're up against a powerful opponent. And finally, we'll get to the payout.
Okay, so the gavel has fallen. Before anything else can happen, we need to know who's who in this next phase. Let's meet the team.
Right, so this whole process is run by a specialized crew. You've got the enforcement judge, who's the director of this whole operation. Then there's you, the creditor, the winner, who's trying to get what you're owed. Of course, you have the debtor, the person who's supposed to pay up. And holding it all together is the enforcement assistant, who handles all the paperwork and the money. Every single one has a crucial part to play.
Okay, so you're the creditor. How do you actually get this ball rolling? You can't just show up at the court and demand action. No, you need a special key to unlock the court's enforcement power.
And getting that key is a very specific three-step dance. Step 1, obviously, you win your case. Step 2, you get what's called a sened tanfizi. Think of this as the supercharged version of your judgment. It's an official enforcement document stamped and sealed that spells out a very clear, very specific, and very immediate obligation. Then, step 3, you have to officially notify the debtor and give them 1 week to comply. The system gives them one last shot to do the right thing on their own.
And that enforcement document, that sened tanfizi, it's not messing around. The formula stamped on it is incredibly serious. Listen to this. It says the document will be enforced compulsorily, even by using armed force. I mean, wow, that's not a polite suggestion. It's a command from the state with all of its power standing right behind it.
All right, so that 1 week grace period is up. And crickets. The debtor hasn't budged. So what happens now? Well, the enforcement judge basically has two major paths they can go down, and the choice depends entirely on what the original case was about.
The law has two very different toolkits. If the judgment was about an action, like say someone needs to vacate a property or return a child in a custody dispute, the court uses what's called direct enforcement. That can mean fines, jail time, or even physical force to make somebody do the thing. But if it's all about the money, the court switches to indirect enforcement, and that means one thing: seizing the debtor's assets to sell them off and cover the debt.
So let's follow that second path, because it's the most common one. This is where the court starts seizing the debtor's stuff. But here's where the law gets really fascinating. The court's power isn't limitless. It's actually very, very specific about what can be taken, and maybe more importantly, what can't.
And this list tells you so much about the system's philosophy. The court is forbidden from taking things like the debtor's primary home, the tools they need to do their job, or even 3 months' worth of food for their family. It also protects part of their salary, their essential livestock, and even an author's rights to their work before it's published. This is huge. It shows the goal isn't just to collect a debt, it's to do so without completely destroying a person's ability to live and work. It's a balance between justice for the creditor and basic dignity for the debtor.
So, once the court has identified and seized the assets that are fair game, the next part is pretty straightforward. They bring in an expert to put a price tag on everything, and then it all goes to a public auction, sold to the highest bidder. The whole point is to turn property into cold, hard cash to pay off that debt.
But what about the, let's call them boss-level debtors? What if the person who owes you money isn't a person at all, but the government? Or what if your judgment is from a court in a completely different country? Well, the law has a special playbook for these tricky situations. Yeah, you can't just send the bailiffs over to the Ministry of Finance. There's a formal process, a chain of command you have to follow. First, the government agency gets a whole 30 days to comply. If nothing happens, the case gets kicked up to the Prime Minister's office for another 45 days. It's a lot of waiting. But, and this is key, if there's still no action, the enforcement judge has the ultimate power to issue an order and seize the money directly from the government's bank accounts. So there is a backstop.
And enforcing a foreign judgment? That's possible too. But the Yemeni courts have a strict checklist. For one, the judgment can't violate local laws or public order. And crucially, there has to be reciprocity, which is basically a legal you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. The other country has to agree to enforce Yemeni judgments too. On top of that, the case has to be totally finished, no more appeals, and everyone had to be properly represented. It's all about ensuring fairness before lending out the state's power.
We've finally arrived at the last step. The assets have been sold, the auction is over, and there's a pile of cash sitting in the court's treasury. Now for the moment we've all been waiting for. Who gets paid, and in what order?
Well, it's not a free-for-all. The law sets up a very clear pecking order. First, the House takes its cut. All the costs of running the enforcement process, court fees, expert salaries, get paid off first. Next up are priority debts, with things like alimony at the top of the list. After that, any secured creditors, like a bank that had a mortgage on a house that was sold, get their piece of the pie. And then, finally, whatever money is left over gets divided up among all the other general creditors, which is where you, the original winner, finally get your due.
So there you have it. From a simple verdict on paper to a final payout, it is a detailed, powerful, and really complex system. It's designed to give real teeth to a judge's ruling, while also trying to carve out a space for the debtor's basic human dignity. And that leaves us with a big question to chew on. Does a system like this really strike the perfect balance? Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.